Meanwhile, in Japan and Germany, high-speed electric trains simply glide to a stop. But outside Melbourne, a diesel train zooms down the track. Its engineers unaware of a hidden danger.
You get these switchers actually in the rail lines themselves switching. These false signals keep popping things on and off. And trains will be switched on the wrong track, and the operators may or may not know that that's happening.
You'd be barreling down the railroad tracks on a runaway train.
The death toll is going to be enormous. Everywhere.
Once the lights go off, they're not going to come back on. I doubt if they would be back in 10 or 15 years.
Humanity will soon discover that electricity is more than a convenience. In terms of sheer survival, it's a matter of life and death.
The water supply rapidly dropping off and pressure going down. A fire crew gets through to a fire and there's people trapped inside the building. They run the hose up to the hydrant and the hose stays flat because there's no pressure. What do? They have to just stand there and watch it burn and watch people die. Preppers are ordinary citizens, decent folks who are trying to think ahead. Think about, what do I do with the community? And the really smart ones have networked up into teams. Doctors, nurses, mechanics, people who do things with their hands.
No electricity means no fuel, which means no cars, trucks, or farm machinery. Some try to revert to horses and mules, but their efforts are doomed.
None of us really has the amount of horses that we need in order to run an 1870s existence in today's suburban world.
For the normal person, it takes training to understand how to hitch a horse up to a plow or to use it for transportation for moving heavy wagons.
And for starving people, horses and mules are more valuable as sustenance.
Hey.
There'll be 100 people standing looking at that horse as their next dinner. There will be no horse or mule transportation.
In fact, it took 2 years for NASA to finally issue a press release saying, oh, by the way, 2 years ago, we almost had a catastrophic failure of civilization as we know it.
It's going to be natural laws.
Those without any moral scruples will see this as, you got something I want? I'll kill you for it.
They become targets for those who had failed to prepare.
As a result of thirst and starvation and riots and social disruption, you would have at least tens of millions of people died.
As people everywhere fight to make it, a new crisis erupts at the massive Pemex oil refinery outside Mexico City. Emergency generators fail. So the automatic valves can't release pressure that builds naturally in giant refinery tanks called reactors.
50 years ago, supervisor got on the phone, hey, Charlie, open the valve on tank number 3. So old Charlie would go over, open the valve.
Now, such operations are computer-controlled. And technicians discover that old-fashioned manual attempts to release pressure are difficult or impossible. Temperatures in the tank rise to thousands of degrees. It finally explodes. And a chain reaction ignites the entire refinery.
Fires turn into big explosions, creating toxic clouds that will travel long distances and generate many, many casualties that will overwhelm hospitals.
The polluted air will devastate thousands. Warm tropical havens like the Congo, Thailand, or Costa Rica are just as dangerous.
Totally uninhabitable, not just because of air conditioning, but because mosquito control is gone.
If you don't have electricity to get around doing pest control, all the larvae hatch, and then all the mosquitoes eat infected blood, and then they transfer that infected blood to humans, and all of a sudden you have a mass-scale malaria outbreak.
Tropical diseases that once killed millions, but have been kept in check for decades, come roaring back.
Cholera, diphtheria, these horrible diseases that are excellent at spreading.
The pandemic situation is going to be terrifying.
As a winter chill descends on Chicago, people struggle to survive in the burned remains.
Let's say it's winter and you're in Chicago and it goes to 20 below zero and you have no heat.
People burn furniture and chop down trees for fuel. Or try to.
When was the last time you actually cut a tree down and then cut it into stove lengths of 12 to 18 inches, let it season for 3 to 6 months, then stood it up and split it with an axe, and then finally dragged it in and got a fire going without cutting your own leg off in the process? You see the problem? It ain't gonna work. Hardening the grid is a remarkably simple, inexpensive process, as little as $10 to $15 billion.